Hey everyone, and welcome. Have you ever looked back at a language class you took and thought, wow, that seems so old-fashioned now? Or maybe you've noticed that the way we're told to learn languages is, well, always changing. One year it's all about drills, the next it's all conversation. It's a real puzzle, right? Well, today we're going to put the pieces together. And that's really the million-dollar question, isn't it? It can feel like teaching methods are just trends, like fashion fads that come and go. One minute, a method is celebrated as the best thing ever, and the next, it's basically forgotten. But is it really that random? Or is there something bigger going on behind the scenes? That's what we're here to figure out. So, here's our game plan for solving this mystery. First, we'll dive into the big, powerful academic theories that can cause these massive shifts. Then, we're going to get real and talk about the human element, the practical stuff for teachers and students. After that, we'll uncover the hidden influence of the system. Think publishers, tests, and big institutions. And finally, I'll arm you with a toolkit so you can analyze any new method that comes your way. All right, let's jump into the first piece of our puzzle, the big, game-changing ideas. See, in education, just like in science, a single powerful theory can completely reshape how millions of people learn. We call these paradigm shifts. So what on earth is a paradigm shift? It sounds super academic, I know, but the idea is actually simple. Just think about how we listen to music. We went from vinyl records to cassettes to CDs, and now to streaming everything from the cloud. Each one of those steps wasn't just a small improvement. It was a fundamental change in how we thought about and used music. A paradigm shift in education is exactly like that. It completely flips the script on the basic assumptions of how learning works. And here is maybe the biggest paradigm shift in the history of language teaching. For a very long time, behaviorism was king. The thinking was pretty straightforward. You learn a language kind of like a parrot, just by imitating and repeating things over and over again. Then there's linguist Noam Chomsky came along and basically said, no, that's all wrong. He argued that we're not just parrots. He said that language is this innate, creative ability that's literally hardwired into our brains. This was a bombshell. It changed everything. And that one theoretical shift had massive real-world consequences. All of a sudden, the focus shifted away from drilling perfect grammar and moved toward actually communicating with other people. This is what led to methods that many of us probably experienced in school, like communicative language teaching, where the main goal is just to get your point across, or task-based learning, where you learn by doing a real-world task, like trying to order a coffee in another language. And it all started with that one big idea. But look, a brilliant theory isn't enough to make a method successful. For any idea to actually take hold, it has to be used by real people in real classrooms with all their messy realities. So let's move on to our next piece of the puzzle, the human element. It often boils down to three key human factors that determine whether a new method will sink or swim. We have to ask, is it actually practical for a busy teacher to use? What kind of language skills does it demand from the teacher themselves? And, importantly, does it even fit with the local culture where it's being taught? Let's break those down. First, let's talk practicality. Take a method like total physical response, or TPR. That's where students respond to commands with actions. The teacher says stand up, then everyone stands up. It's super simple to get the hang of. A teacher could learn it in an afternoon. But then you have something like the silent way, which involves these specialized, color-coded charts and wooden rods and requires a really deep philosophical understanding to use it right. So, guess which one is more likely to spread like wildfire? And this brings us to a huge, often overlooked point, the teacher's own language ability. The reality is, a huge number of the world's language teachers are not native speakers of the language they teach. So if some new, fancy method comes along that requires near-native fluency to pull it off, it's just not going to get adopted in a lot of places. It's a massive barrier that has absolutely nothing to do with how good the theory behind it is. Okay, so we've got the big theories and we've got the human factor. But there is a third, incredibly powerful force at play here. This is what you might call the system. The institutions, the big publishing houses, and the testing organizations that often get the final say in what actually happens inside a classroom. You see, a method's success often has way less to do with its academic brilliance and a lot more to do with who is backing it. Does it have a powerful support network behind it, like a government or a big university? Can you package it and sell it in a textbook? And maybe most importantly, does it line up with the big standardized tests that everyone has to take? These forces can absolutely make or break a new teaching method. Here is a perfect example. The Common European Framework of Reference, you've probably seen it as CEFR, was developed by the Council of Europe. a massive international organization. It created a standard way to talk about language levels, A1 for a beginner, C2 for mastery. And because that whole framework was built around the idea of being able to communicate, it gave a huge stamp of approval and legitimacy to communicative language teaching. It suddenly had the backing of a major institution. And yeah, let's not forget the money angle. It's simple, really. If a teaching method can be neatly packaged into a textbook series with workbooks and CDs, publishers will push it hard. Millions and millions of textbooks based on methods like audiolingualism, with all its drills, were sold all over the world. But an approach like the natural approach, which is more about creating a low-stress environment for communication, well, that's a lot harder to turn into a best-selling product. So now that we've kind of pulled back the curtain and seen all the hidden forces that shape how we're taught languages, how can we be smarter about all this? Let's shift gears from just explaining the problem to giving you a solution. Here is a practical toolkit you can use to evaluate any new method that you hear about. Whether you're a teacher, a school director, or just a really curious language learner, you can run any new method through these 6 questions. First, just ask, is this really better than what we have now? And does it actually fit with my beliefs or my school's culture? Then, think about who's recommending it. Is it a trusted expert, or is it a sales pitch? Be honest about how complex it is to actually use day to day. Find out if it's been properly tested in a real classroom, not just a lab. And finally, are the benefits explained in a way that actually makes sense? So, after our whole investigation, we finally found the solution to our puzzle. A teaching method doesn't get popular just because it's the best. Its success or failure depends on this whole complex ecosystem of interconnected factors. Everything from abstract theories in an academic journal to the very practical business of printing and selling textbooks. And this chart really brings that whole story together. A method's success is a cocktail of everything we've talked about. Yeah, the academic theory behind it is a pretty big slice of the pie, but look how big practicality for teachers is, too. And then you've got commercial interests, institutional support, and of course, whether it even makes sense in that culture. No single factor gets to decide the winner. It's the whole ecosystem. And that leaves us with one final and I think really important question to think about. Now that we understand this complex machinery that operates behind the scenes of teaching trends, how do we get better at making our own choices? How can we learn to look past the hype and pick the tools and techniques that are genuinely going to work for us as learners and as educators instead of just blindly following the next big thing? It's something to consider. Thanks for joining.